Hey, I'm going to show you a quick way to test what are probably the most common problems with a scythe. Most people don't want to muck around making wedges and adjusting all this stuff here, all the angles, without actually knowing that it's going to do something. So this is a quick test that you can do just to test whether it's worth putting in that time. And this will cover off most of the things that will go wrong with the way the tang is set up on the end of the snath. So the first thing to look at is how the edge is laying on the ground. So you don't want to be like that, where it's slicing into the ground. You don't want it up there, but you want it somewhere in between. And the easiest way to test that when you're mowing is to literally just lift or lower the snath as you mow, and just see what a difference that makes to you. If you find it does make a big difference to how your neutral mowing stance is, if you normally mow and you're like that, you might be a little bit too low. If you lift up your snath and try it like that, you might find that makes it a lot better. Then consider wedging the end of the tang to lift that angle. The next thing to look at is the way the blade's lying horizontally. So rather than this kind of edge laying, we're looking at how it's sitting in this plane. So whether the tip is digging into the ground or whether the tip is sitting too high. That can make an enormous difference. And again, it depends on your mowing conditions. Sometimes it's nicer to have a slightly elevated tip so it doesn't dig into clumps of grass or even further into the dirt. For lawn, you'd generally like it to sitting fairly level with the center of the belly laying on the ground. But again, to try it is the easiest thing to do. Just see what happens. And you can do that easily without having to change anything, just by shifting your hand position on the grips. So for example, if I want to force the tip down, I'll hold the end of the grips like that. And then what that does is naturally rolls the whole snath around, which pushes the tip to the ground. So try it like that or somewhere in between. If you want to elevate the point, do the opposite. Hold up here, and you'll find it's not comfortable mowing, but you'll see whether it actually makes a difference to the way the blade cuts. So that will elevate quite a lot. The other really important thing to check is your hafting angle. That basically means how this blade is sitting on the snath in terms of where it's there or rotated down to here or open further to here. It's like opening or closing a pocket knife. Again, you can even check that without making any adjustments. You don't need to change the angle in there if you don't want to, although that's a fairly easy change to do. But if you just want to quickly check how much difference the hafting angle is going to make to you, do the similar thing with the grips. I'll just try and line this up for you. So instead of holding in that neutral position, put one hand back and one hand forward. And what that does when you bring your hands back to a neutral position is closes that angle on the blade. If you want to open the angle on the blade, change again. Move this hand back and this hand forward. And when you bring your hands back into a neutral position again, that'll actually open the hafting angle, or the equivalent of opening the hafting angle. You haven't actually changed anything, but you're changing the way the blade is presenting to the grass when you mow. So that's 3 really quick tests you can do without having to change any setup on the snath at all. And it's worth doing, and then if you find it makes a huge difference, that's when you start to think about how you're going to wedge it or maybe even change the tang angles permanently. One last thing that is often a problem with beginners is not taking the burr off the back of the blade. So if your blade's not sharp or it's not prepared well, it doesn't matter what you do with the angles, it's always going to be hard work. When you're sharpening here, try and roll your wrist a little bit. That's what I do. Roll my wrist so you're replicating this being one of those round grinding stones. It hollows the grind, so you're ending up with a very nice sharp hollow profile in there. Same on the back. Now the thing that normally goes wrong with beginners is that they're not changing the angle here enough. So the stroking here, but actually what's happening is they're stroking only a couple of mil into the blade or right before the very edge. So sometimes you need to increase that angle enough to make sure you do actually take that burr off. And you can test that quite easily just by carefully running a fingernail down over there, and if you feel it's catching on something there, that's the burr that you've dragged over from the front and you need to take it off. You can do it quickly and easily, and also a nice long stroke towards the end usually smooths it out. A lot of the scythe sharpness or otherwise is actually just in that movement of the burr. You needn't necessarily have to take off that metal, it's just a case of realigning it. Hope this has helped. There's heaps more information on our website, especially on using wedges for changing these angles. So yeah, if you're finding any of those tests help, give it a whirl.